Oh, and hi, I'm Liz. I'm on Elizabeth.
And I'm Ty.
And we have
There she is.
And we have three other members who weren't able to join us today, named Xavier, Parisa, and Catherine. And we're basically the interviewers at these monthly Zoom meetings in which we get to learn more, as well as interview various guests pertaining to the topic of sexual assault or violence. We are so excited to continue having these monthly Zoom meetings in which we get to learn more about these survivors, as well as many different things in their life, as well as their life story. All the interviews that will be done by us throughout the entire year will be uploaded on our YouTube channel called We Rise Above under our logo called Our Voices Come First. All this information, if you forget, will be added in the chat box right down below so that you can check out as well as share with your friends. So please feel free to bring as many people as you possibly can to these kind of events that we host or these interviews that we host, because our main goal is to just spread awareness and help as many of you as we possibly can. And if you have any further questions, feel free to email us at weriseabove2019@gmail.com, or you can even Instagram DM us on our Instagram page, We Rise Above Official. So without further ado, let's get started with our fifth Survivor Spotlight with the one and only Miss Alma Elizabeth, who has an extremely influential personality and is a strong advocate for mental health, sexual assault awareness, survivor empowerment, and the LGBTQ community. Yay! Thank you so much for joining us today. And would you like to take this time to maybe further introduce yourself and tell us about your life and your story?
I would love to. Thank you so much for having me. So hi, my name is Alma Elizabeth. I am an artist, an LGBTQ trans rights activist, and I am a survivor of sexual domestic assault. My background is primarily in reality television. I was first on MTV's The Real World in 2015. I was then on a follow-up show called MTV's The Challenge in 2017. Between The Real World and The Challenge, I was in an incredibly abusive relationship, which then manifested itself during an episode of PTSD that took place on national television in the last episode that I was on The Challenge. I was in the middle of a physical altercation with another one of the castmates, and it triggered this whole psychotic break where I relived some of the more traumatic moments of my abusive relationship. And at the time, you know, it was like horrible, knowing like, oh, I'm on TV and this is going to be seen by so many people. But what I've learned in the years since then, and since being more vocal about what happened to me, is that this is an issue that affects 1 in 5 women, 1 in 2 trans people, and many surveys would suggest up to 30% of men as well. So spaces like this are really important for me to be in, because I think this is a very important thing to talk about, and any education that we can create as communities to prevent this to happening to other people's is important, valid, and necessary.
Yes, thank you so much for that. That was extremely helpful. So we're just going to jump right in. So we've actually created some pre-made questions for you, and we're just going to ask you them and, you know, help our audience get the best advice and best wisdom that they possibly can from you.
All right.
So thank you for joining us. I just want to start off by saying you're an inspiration to us and so many people worldwide. You aren't shy to speak your mind and make people feel comfortable with themselves and others. We love how open you are with your followers, with topics like body image, assault, boundaries, and so much more. So my question to you is, what inspired you to share your story, and what has been the most surreal moment since you put your life on social media?
I think that what really empowered me to share my story was the Me Too movement. At the time, I was living in New York, and I started seeing the names of so many people I knew and so many people I had worked with, so many people I had met in the industry start describing these horrific instances of abuse and assault. I had come in contact with these two incredible women at People Magazine during a press event. They had seen the episode where I had this episode of PTSD, and they asked me if I would be interested in writing a tell-all in People Magazine. So at the height of the Me Too movement, I had the opportunity to tell my story. And at the time, I was not in a position where I felt comfortable to release my abuser's name. But not very soon before I came in contact with your amazing organization, I made my story public with another nonprofit group called Why I Didn't Report, which for any survivors who are watching this, it's an amazing resource for people like us who have been through a traumatic sexual experience. I contributed to the project by talking about why I didn't report his name. I came forward with his name, and then it kind of started this whole other wave of interest and conversation concerning what happened to me, why this happens to so many young women in my industry and in every industry. And why it is so important for us to make real efforts to provide real sexual education in middle schools, high schools, and colleges, so that people don't run into the same issues that I did as like a young, naive person dating a very, very emotionally, physically, sexually abusive person in New York. How was that? Long-winded, eh?
That was super helpful. Thank you so much. I just want to say for our Zoom audience as well, we are going to put in the chat box as well, we're going to put Miss Elizabeth's Instagram handle. And honestly, when we were looking through her Instagram, she has so much beneficial information through there. And she's always so open with her followers. So please go ahead and follow her as well.
Thank you so much.
Because someone of power and fame manipulated you, did you feel like your voice was taken away? Do you think power and fame in the industry allowed people to easily get away with any sexual violence?
Yes, and I think that I might amend one word in your question to something that I think speaks to the survivor's journey more than the abusers, and that is changing the word power to privilege. I don't think that anyone has the ability to take away mine or any other survivor of abuse's power. Our power is something that we keep for ourselves, that we hold, and that power is what keeps us alive in the moments where we are met with the gravity of what has happened to us, which is horrific. But that privilege, and I think why these conversations are so important, is because there is a reason why we see the primary perpetuators of these crimes and abuses, especially in the media, being very powerful, very wealthy, cis, straight, white men. And that is because they sit at the top of the privilege pyramid, and that privilege gives them protections that allow them to continually violate the rights and boundaries of people who are lower than them in that caste system or on that pyramid. I think that because my partner at the time had greater resources, fame, and to be quite frank, you know, I was a non-binary person in a relationship with a cis man. I now identify as trans, but even back then was displaying a lot of behaviors that align themselves more with femininity than masculinity. And that created a privilege and a power disparity in our relationship that he then made a part of the abuse. I think that what we have to do as a society is, as we're having these conversations, which are very difficult, we also need to continue the conversations about race and gender and the privilege disparity that exists between men and women and between different people of color, and talk about the ways that those privilege disparities contribute to the greater abuses that we discuss in conversations like this one.
Thank you for that. What are some signs or red flags people should notice if someone is in an unhealthy relationship?
I think for me, the biggest thing was I realized that my voice was getting quieter and quieter and quieter. And I think that that is the quintessential red flag that an abusive or a relationship is becoming abusive. When you start feeling like you are losing or sacrificing your identity, your comfort, your boundaries, the things that protect you, that's when the abuser has an opportunity to begin taking advantage or to perpetuate abuse. And the other problem with losing your voice in the context of a relationship is that then after the abuse takes place and the relationship ends, or even if there is no relationship, after the abuse takes place, because our voices have been silenced, we are less likely to come forward and incriminate the people that have abused us. So I think at the first sign of being like, oh, you know, I feel like I can't speak my mind without being hurt or scared, or, oh, I feel like my opinion isn't being validated. That's when we start turning to people around us, mentors, friends, ideally mental health professionals, and asking hard questions like, hey, I was in this situation and this is what happened. What are your thoughts? What are your feelings? And listening to those people if and when they tell us that we need to get out.
Thank you for that. Would it be appropriate to call them out online so people would know who they are, like exposing, for example? If so, how should they handle it?
So there are some things that survivors need to be careful of. Going back to the conversation that we had about privilege, depending on who your abuser is, a lot of the times they can make your life really, really difficult if you do come forward with their name in a way that they feel defames their reputation. That was the situation that I was in, and I didn't feel comfortable coming forward until now because I was worried about the legal ramifications of doing so. What I would recommend to anybody who is a victim of abuse is the first thing that you need to do is you need to get to some kind of medical facility, and you need to have a formal checkup from a doctor. That's why I think services like Planned Parenthood are so important to maintain. Right now, we have a president that is threatening to defund Planned Parenthood. This is unacceptable. That's a resource for women and queer people and men to get help and to get medical assistance when they have become the victims of assault. I went to Planned Parenthood after my assault. I received a full checkup. I actually learned that I had been assaulted while I was at a Planned Parenthood because I had grown up in a really religious conservative home. I thought that if you were in a relationship and you were the woman in the relationship, that if your partner wanted or needed sex, you just had to provide it to them, which is a narrative that is, perpetuated in a lot of more conservative cultures. It wasn't until my doctor informed me that I had significant tearing in my sexual orifices, and that by never giving my consent to have sex, that I had been raped. Which to me was an entirely foreign concept, because even though I was saying no and I was saying I didn't want it, I believed that in a relationship, I didn't even have the right to say no. And that's why I think that our first line of defense is our health professionals. Second line of defense is our medical health professionals, and then relying on the counsel of those two people together to help us move forward with what steps may need to be taken legally. I obviously am incredibly mistrusting of the police, especially as a trans woman, especially as a marginalized person living in 2020 in America. So I can't say that the best line of defense against a predator is going to people who they themselves are often abusers and predators. But I do have a lot of faith in our medical community, especially the women in our medical community, and I have a lot of faith in our mental health community. And it has been my experience that those are the people that offer us the best and most helpful resources.
Oh, really appreciate that. One more question. How would you advise young people to set boundaries in a relationship? For example, like what would their conversation with their partner look like?
So my partner and I, we've implemented a really exciting and really healthy communication tool that I advise to all people, whether you have been a victim of sexual assault or whether you're just trying to practice consent, and that's a red light, yellow light, green light conversation. Anytime either of us is interested in having sex, we say green light. The other person then has the opportunity to either say yellow light, red light, or green light. Red light means no, I'm not in a place to have sex right now. Gives the other person an opportunity to back off without having their feelings hurt. Yellow light means, yeah, you know, I could have sex, but it's going to take some foreplay. So let's warm up to this a little bit. And then green light means, yeah, I'm ready to go. You're ready to go. Let's have sex. That has been a really healthy tool for me because because I have been subjected to sexual abuse. A lot of the times when I'm about to have sex, I don't want to have a conversation about sexual abuse. I just want to have sex, and sex is fabulous. So we should be, having healthy, great, consensual sex. I think the trick is just creating those like playful, fun, sexy, and allow consensual sex.
So I want to go back to your when you said education. You didn't have education on sexual violence and rape, right? Today it has been, this is very important topic that needs to be addressed. How do you think that our community and our schools system should implement sexual violence curriculum into their program?
Well, I think first of all, we need to recover as a nation from this fear of talking about sex and sexuality. It's just ridiculous. I mean, like, I can't speak for any of your experiences, but I remember the first time I was propositioned for sex, I was 15 years old. And it was a healthy, consensual opportunity to have sex with my girlfriend at the time, who I really liked. And I look back, and if I had had the tools and the education wherewith to have healthy sex with her, it could have been a really wonderful experience. But because I was very religious and because of a lot of my fears and a lack of education, I said no. And then unfortunately, my first real sexual encounter was then a product of assault. And I think that that's where we have an opportunity to just, honestly, it is the adults and the leadership in this country that just need to grow up and face the reality that the average American high school and middle school is a lot more like Euphoria and a lot less like Glee, I guess. It's difficult. We have conversations that need to be had about consent, sex, and sexuality. And I think that we need educators in there that can go in and talk about those things in like a fun way and an informative way, and not a way that makes sex like so scary. I mean, while I was in high school, they were still teaching us that you could get blue waffle from having sex. That's not even a real STD. And we were being taught that as a part of our sexual health curriculum in Boise, Idaho. So I think that we need to take serious steps in, demystifying sex and sexuality, having conversations about female sex and about queer sex, because I think the other part of what is lacking in our sexual education is a celebration of the celebration of the female body. And I think that that is part of what contributes to rape culture as a whole, is that we have created an entire sexual narrative as a culture that caters to men, male bodies, male pleasure, and that is not the reality of sex. And that place or person should experience the same amount of pleasure, consent, and joy. Because honestly, that's what sex is about.
I completely agree with you, because I feel like if we start normalizing these education on sex and sexual violence, maybe we would reduce the amount of sexual violence happening around the world.
Yes.
You are a huge advocate for body positivity, survivor rights, and you also shared your story on social media platform. Have you dealt with
any kind of backlash or people have criticized you for who you are or talking about these topics?
Yeah, I not so much in the last few years. Since Me Too, I think there are a lot more inherent societal protections for victims, which is such a victory, cultural victory. But previous to Me Too, when I first started telling people that I had been assaulted by my partner at the time, a lot of people were saying, well, you can't come forward with his name because you'll destroy his career. And at the time, I was so naive that I was like, oh yeah, I don't want to ruin someone's career, even though he had ruined my life for a time through this violent assault. And I think that that goes back to this evolving conversation we're having about privilege at large. You know, like if someone exploits you or takes advantage of you, they have lost their right to a career, to respect, and to opportunity. You know, like I don't think that any abuser can fully comprehend the damage and that they do to someone when they assault them. And I think that the only way to hold those people accountable is to, as a culture, to then be like, hey, no, you actually don't get this opportunity. You actually don't get to work with these people. You actually don't get to be in these spaces because you're
Absolutely.
Totally agree with
So before we move on to our Zoom audience and our other questions, would you like to say anything to our audiences who are watching you, or people who need just that push to share their story or to need some strength?
Yeah, thanks for giving me space to say that, to do that. I honestly thought I was going to die after I got assaulted. I don't know. I was in such like a depressive haze that it was borderline catatonic. You know, I remember the day that I was supposed to go to the clinic for my post-assault checkup, I fainted in the shower. And my friends came in, my two roommates at the time, an amazing friend of mine named Stefan, came in, had to carry me out of the shower and dry me and dress me. And then my friend Stefan physically carried me to the subway, held me all the way to the Planned Parenthood, and then carried me into my appointment. And that wasn't because my body was, you know, so battered I couldn't move. It was because my mind had been so scarred, that the thought of moving forward after what had happened to me seemed impossible. But that was, you know, almost 5 years ago now. And in the years since then, I have been able to form such an incredible community of people around me. I'm doing work that I am passionate about. I am in a relationship where I get to have fantastic sex with someone who I really, really like. And I think that the message that I hope people take away from this conversation is that the moments where you feel like I can't do this, you are giving that power, like we talked about, to your abuser. But if you'll remember, your power is it's not something you can give away. It's not something that can be taken from you. That power lives in you. You just have to remind yourself that it's there. And if you can do so and you can get to the next day, then you can get to the day after that. And then you can get to the day after that. And then before you know it, you're in the position I'm in where it's been 5 years and you have this incredible life. And you look back on what happened and who did it to you. And now all I feel is pity, you know, for my abuser. You know, I understand that someone who does that has to feel so insecure and weak to do something like that. And being in the relationships I've been in since then, where I got to have consensual, healthy, healing sex, has really revealed to me that when people take, it's because they don't understand, you know, they don't understand what it means to be held and loved and adored. And if you'll excuse my French.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Now we're gonna move on to our questions. I'm gonna pass on to Rania.
I know that there's 13-year-olds here, so I'm sorry, but sometimes you have to say the F word. It's very important. It's a
It's
very
okay.
important word.
It's okay.
Thank you so much for all of this information. I think it's great, and I agree with you 100%. Like, we need to keep Planned Parenthood for sure. So to move on, the rest of this time is now going to be given to the Zoom audience. So in this time, you guys can ask any questions that you have. And we've also created an online poll on Instagram for the people who unfortunately couldn't attend this live Survivor Spotlight, could ask their question there and we can ask it to you. So for everyone who has a question, feel free to put it in the chat box or feel free to also unmute your mic and ask.
We're gonna give you guys about like a minute or so, just so that you can just maybe quickly ask it or just write it in the chat box.
I'm gonna fix this crazy curl on the side of my head while you'll do that. Okay, cool, whatever. Got a mind of her own.
All right, so one of the questions we got was, do you think that teenagers tend to hide their pain or abusive relationships due to the fear of their parents, friends, and or society?
Absolutely. I mean, I remember the first time a friend confided in me that she had been assaulted. We were 16, and it had happened on a cruise ship with a stranger. And, and there's still a lot of processing that needs to take place. We're still doing a lot of work in our friendship to understand what happened to her and to help remove her from that, emotionally and mentally. But I think that if you don't have a safe group of friends, which she and I didn't, if you don't have parents that you feel like you can comfortably talk to about your sex life, I think that's when there's an opportunity to go to a teacher that you trust, to go to a counselor at your school. And I think that the most important thing is to feel empowered to talk to someone that you actually want to talk to. Like if you're like, oh God, I don't like my friends. I hated my friends in high school. So I don't know maybe y'all are in a better position than I was in, but my friends were and a lot of my like a lot of the counselors at our school were like idiots. So I was like, God, who am I supposed to talk to? I wish that I had an amazing English teacher in high school named Lori Scialis, who always created so much space for me to share about my life. I think if you really, really think about it, there's at least one person in your life who has some privilege that you might not, typically an adult, that you can turn to and be like, hey, something happened to me and I'm unsure about whether or not it was consensual. And then rely on those people to help formulate ideas that can put you in a safer and better position.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Sorry, audio issues.
You're fine.
Thank you so much. Another question we did get was, how important is the role of a therapist in your opinion, and what would you say to people in defense of seeing a therapist?
Oh God, I love my therapist. I'm seriously obsessed with her. She's so great. My therapist, her name is Melissa Da Silva. Her Instagram is @realmelissa.dasilva. If you follow my page, I link to her today in my most recent post because I talk about the conversations that she and I have often. But it would have been impossible, I think, for me to recover to the extent that I have without the help of a mental health professional. I just feel like it's such a personal experience that it's very helpful to have someone to kind of just help you get out of your head. And I feel like our heads is where our trauma lives. And so to have an escape from that, I think is very necessary.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
I agree, definitely. I feel like therapists, they really help a lot, and a lot of people don't realize that it's a very personal connection a lot, and they can really help you. So thank
Yeah.
you so much.
Yeah,
for
great question.
that. One more question we have was, what have you seen as the biggest help or comfort for the survivors of trauma and victim shaming and abusive relationships?
Will you say the last part of that question for me again?
I'm actually going to repeat it for her
Oh
because
yeah, of course.
wait, Rania, do you want me to repeat it? Because I think your internet's a little glitchy.
We had a little interference there in the middle.
Just a little bit.
Okay,
I think I'm just going to repeat it for her really quickly.
that would be great.
What have you seen as the biggest help or comfort for survivors of trauma, victim shaming, or abuse in relationships?
I mean, I can really only speak for myself, but I would say that community has been the most healing thing for me, both online communities and communities in person. I first started finding communities online, like why I didn't report, and kind of silently built my community around me by just like reading and liking and commenting. But then as I grew more confident in my ability to tell my story and also my like rights, protections, and powers as a survivor, I started like sharing pretty readily with people, like I usually tell people on a second date that I was assaulted. I really try and, I try and create protections around those conversations as not to trigger people, be like, hey, is it okay for me to make space to talk about something traumatic that happened to me? I was assaulted in a relationship among other women and queer people. Most often response is, oh my God, me too. And I think that that's where that hashtag, came from. It's this literal guttural reaction where like when we talk to especially other women and other queer people, and it's like, hey, this horrible thing happened to me. We realize we're not alone. And that is where we hear, me too, me too, me too, me too. My two best girlfriends have both also been the victims of like very violent assaults. And I find a lot of solace in just being able to like, in moments where I'm having PTSD or moments where I'm really struggling in a relationship because I don't know how to talk to a partner about what's going on in my head when like someone really wonderful and sexy is trying to initiate consensual sex and I have a panic attack for no reason. That's where I think community really comes in and helping us feel normal, helping us feel sane, and helping us feel safe.
I totally agree with you. And when you find those couple of people in your life that actually will support you no matter what happens, I feel like going through anything just makes it a little bit easier. So
Yeah.
The best thing ever. Another question that we have for you.
Are there any other questions I can answer?
Yeah. We have one more question in the chat. So someone actually said, you're so strong, and it's amazing that you're so strong. And she asked do you think it's better to tell like your near and dear people before, like as one of the first people during like the really initial stages of your assault?
Trying to make who are they asking to talk to it?
I'm sorry, you're kind of breaking up a little bit. Could you repeat that?
I'm trying to make sense of the question. So let me open up the chat and see if reading it, is it better to tell near and dears one of your hurts first? So first of all, is it Alesha? Hi. Or maybe Alicia. Either way, hello. So what I would say, I am a huge proponent of as soon as you can, as soon as something has happened, getting to a medical professional and having them collect a DNA sample and do a thorough medical analysis, because that is an automatic protection right there where you can then take that evidence to the proper authorities with the assurance of a medical professional and be like, let's put someone in jail. Again, I don't know if we can rely on our police force, but I have a lot of confidence in our medical professionals. If that needs to happen through somebody else who is close to you, then I think that's the time to be like, hey, I need to say something without a strong emotional reaction so that we can make a game plan together, whether that's a friend, a parent, a religious leader, someone in your immediate community, going to them and being like, hi, hey, I need to say something to you with the assurance that there is not going to be a strong reaction so that we can make a game plan and we can get through the next 24 hours. Then we can go ahead and do everything else that we need to emotionally. But right now, I need your help getting to a medical professional so that I can have a rape kit done. That is the most important thing, because ultimately, if you have that rape kit, it is going to give you so much more power in confronting whoever abused you later on, especially if it gets taken to court. I know that that's a really scary way to talk about this, especially because it is so overwhelming and emotionally crazy when it happens. But what I wish I would have done is taken just a moment and be like, hey, give yourself a break. Check out for 2 seconds and put on, my Carmen Sandiego hat and get to work, getting someone prosecuted. Because the real thing that I think, something that I think is really important to bring up is one of the ways that I was able to find power in talking about what happened to me was the realization that if I didn't come forward, it could happen to somebody else. And what happened to me was so horrific that the thought of even being remotely complicit in it taking place in someone else's life made me sick to my stomach. So it was like, okay, I need to be a big girl. I need to this guy's world out. And so that's what I did.
Thank you. We have one more question in the chat. It says, have you ever told your story to any family members? And if so, how difficult was it for you?
Yes, I actually told both my mom and my dad almost immediately after it happened. Both my parents are very, very religious and very conservative, and both of them were very, very victim blaming in response. My dad asked me if I had been quote unquote stupid enough to contract AIDS, which is actually impossible. You contract HIV and then AIDS happens if HIV is not treated properly. And even then, if you do get HIV, it's very treatable in today's America. All of that to say, very inappropriate response to, hey, I think I was just assaulted by my boyfriend. Then went to my mom and tried to talk to her about it. And she said, because I had made the choice to be in a same-sex, at the time, same-sex relationship, that being assaulted by my partner was the natural consequence of doing so. Also, very, very, very unhealthy way to treat a conversation about assault. So I don't know, who's watching this and what kind of situation anyone may be in that is the victim of sexual assault. But I know personally that oftentimes our family is not the right people to talk to. And I think that that's why we need to feel empowered to reach out, to put on, that thinking cap and to be like, okay, who in my community do I trust? And can I, get the resources I need from them to afford myself and other people protections that will prevent what happened to me to happening again or to other people.
Wow, thank you so much. So we have one last question and one comment. It's a little bit of a big question, so I'm going to try
Sure.
just like how it says. Okay, so it says, when you explain your story, were there some people who didn't believe you? If so, how did you feel about this? If not, what do you suggest people should do if they find out that their closest friends don't believe them? The reason I'm asking this is because sadly, I've seen that when people have been assaulted by someone of higher power, people don't believe them, even if it's their closest friends.
This is very common. I think honestly, unfortunately, this is more common than believing people. And I'll take just a moment to explain why I think that phenomena takes place. I think it's an avoidance technique when our mind is met with the realization that something truly, truly terrible has happened to someone we care about, immediately we want to reject it because the thought of actually allowing that to sink in is traumatizing for the person who we tell who cares about us. Not nearly as traumatizing as it is to actually be abused or assaulted. But, you know, if you think about the people that you love the most, no one wants them to come, like no one would want their best friend or a sibling or a loved one to come to them and be like, hey, this really horrible thing happened to me. With that being said, I think that we do need to make a practice of believing people when they come forward. It has been my experience that no one comes forward about this for attention. That is such... we also need to stop putting people in the Supreme Court that are actively blocking the stories of the people, i.e. the women who they have assaulted. We have a Supreme Court justice right now who has assaulted someone, and we put that poor woman in a public spectacle and denied her the right to her story and her abuse by electing him to the highest court in the land. We have set an example as a country that is deplorable. And I think we need to make a practice of when people are confronted with the reality of their choices, when our abusers are confronted with what has been done and what they have done to ruin the lives of some of their abused or some of their victims, we need to ruin their lives in return. That is not to say that I agree with cancel culture 100%. Sometimes people say the wrong thing, and I don't think that that deserves, you know, like total cancellation. What I do think deserves total cancellation is any form of sexual abuse or assault. If you your career should be over and you should be in jail for life.
I totally agree with you 100%. And also someone in the comment also said, yes, you put that perfectly. You worded that perfectly. So
hi, Alessa. Thanks.
Yeah. So with that, there's just one more comment that someone said. They said, I just want to tell you thank you so much for sharing your experience and positivity with the world, despite all the hardness you've gone through. You give me so much hope. Oh, and that's so true, not only for this person, but probably for all of us. And you are so amazing and you're so beautiful.
I'm sending a response right now because I just figured out I can do the chat. Woo!
There we go. Woohoo. Okay, go ahead, have fun with the chat. I'm just gonna hand it off to Ty now.
Okay.
So thank you all. So this brings us to the conclusion of our 5th Survivor Spotlight. Thank you all for attending our 5th interview. I hope you learned as much as we did today. Just a reminder, we will have many more interviews in the following weeks, as well as all the interviews we have done previously will be available on our YouTube channel called We Rise Above. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel and leave a like for our videos to support us. Please share these videos and information to all your friends and family. Have a great rest of your day, everyone. We hope to see you at our next Survivor Spotlight, which is on November 8th. So stay tuned, guys. More information on this will be uploaded on the We Rise Above Instagram page. Again, thank you all for joining us, and a huge thank you to Miss Elizabeth for sharing her story with us all. Thank you.
Thank you all so much. It
Bye.
was so nice spending some time with you tonight. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.